We are live.
Hello and welcome to our Path Through History weekend. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers in Canal Falls and around the world and those who play the lovely part. Welcome to our 5 Locks Walk Tour. We start here at Lock 16, New Lock 16 that is. In 1999 to 2000, Marbletown started to restore the 5 Locks Walk Tour so that it can, and Bill Merchant.
No, the Canal Society.
The Canal Society made that applicable as well so that we can have it to share with the community.
Who's that with you, Amanda?
Yeah, I want to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Courtney McNamara. I'm the curatorial assistant / docent / your new video editor for all the online content you were seeing, and recent graduate of Johns Hopkins University. I have my master's in museum studies and digital curation, so I'm happy to be here and putting out all this great content for everyone to enjoy.
And we're happy to have you, Courtney.
Moving forward,
So looking into the atypical lock.
Now, why would this be atypical?
oh, there's a duck.
Uh-oh. Got to sign a release. So this lock is atypical because it's dry-laid stone.
Yes, as compared, it's cut stone here, right? So compared to composite lock in some of the other areas.
Yeah, so a composite lock, I'm going to show you, would be a lock made with stone like what I'm showing you right now, lined with oak. Okay, sorry.
See, there's a couple things we could point out.
Yep, there's this the Keystone time capsule from the Twin Arch aqueduct removed in 1954. Yes?
56, I think they dynamited it. Yep. Built in 1825.
And there's 2 snubbing posts on each side.
What's a snubbing post?
Snubbing post is where you...
A snubbing post is what you tied the boats to when you came to a lock. On some of them, there's them all over the place. They're unique. You can tell what a snubbing post is basically because there's these nice deep ridges on the side of the rock that were there from all the wet rope covered in sand wearing down the rock over the years. And we even have some really cool ones on the side of the building over here, which we can show at some point or now.
Well, while we're talking about rope burns, that would only be on the lock snubs. So these snubbing posts, which by the way are in a spot that used to hold 6 foot of water, just so we get an idea. But I think this is fascinating. See if we can get a look at it without all this modern stuff. The Canal Company bought this building in 1850, and somebody chipped off that corner.
I don't know the story quite as well as you do.
Well, you know, they had 2 towing paths here in High Falls.
Yes.
We'll talk about why when we get later. But it's clear then that the teams going this way went around this building because they even chipped off the corner of the building to accommodate so it wouldn't cut the rope. And you can see all those wet, sandy rope burns. Like we'll see, we'll get a closer look at one of the lock snubs when we're further out on the walk. Mm-hmm. It's so hot out here, we might want to actually start our walk. Yeah.
We're going to go on the old path, not the new path.
Yeah, there's a fence in the way still currently. If anybody has any questions out there, we're happy to. The reason why we go live and make fools of ourselves some of the time is because we want to be able to answer your questions as you have them. It was great that the Canal Society and the state of New York put the money into restoring the 5 Locks Walkover in 2000. And we're doing our best now to restore it. There's a grant that they gave us. You can see the new fence work over there. There wouldn't have been a bridge here. There would have been a gear house on the other end. And in fact, we probably have a photo that shows that, don't we, Amanda? Let's see if we can. So first let me show them this. And then let's go look at this picture. See if it's going to let us see this picture. There we go. Hello, Sean. How you doing today? So this is what it looked like back in the latter period. This is actually made into a stereoscope. We speculate on whether that's not a black man or not. It was very rare to have pictures of people of color. We know that they worked on the canal. They worked for less money. You could get a black crew for $33 a month where a white crew wanted 40. But this is what this looked like, and I will go back and you can see once again what it looks like there. This is a 90-foot long lock, 15 feet wide. Hey, Sean. Good to see you. Or not see you, but see that you're there. I think we have to stop for a second. I just so love this sign. The uber talented Kayla Altland, the other deputy director, designed this sign when COVID hit. Oh, we're back in the sun again. Let's see what we can do about that. What is it we have here?
Alright, so at the beginning of the 5 blocks walk here, there is a bypass loom, which is a necessary feature along the canal. The loading slips that were once... Oh. Should we let the siren go by?
Possibly. You want to be careful not to...
Oh, I should have put bud spray on.
It's sunscreen I need. Hey Nathan, thanks for joining us today. Happy Father's Day to all of you. It's hard to see now. These are always better to see in the spring. Why we're doing Where is Our Historian in the spring and fall and not during the summer. Good-naturedly, that's it. There you go.
Oh.
Sean, he's a... So, but now what is this bypass loom filling? This...
Oh, I didn't hear what you... Sorry, the siren got in my way. So there are 2 different types of materials that were unloaded here, both cement and coal, and a portion of the coal that was unloaded here was actually used to ignite the cement kilns.
There was another slip on the other side. Do you remember what... It's now the firehouse's basement. Someday we're going to have to film in there. You're absolutely right, Courtney. There, now we're in the shade. We'll all feel better. It's hard to make out quite what we got here. This is a loading key.
Oh, right.
Q-U-A-Y. Hey, let's just call it a slip.
Yeah.
And do you want to tell them why they had loading keys here? This is the only section on the canal where they had a towing path on both sides. Mm-hmm. And because of that, they didn't have the berm side, which was the side that they didn't tow from. And it was so important to the canal company to accommodate the maybe 10% of traffic that wasn't their own coal boats, that once they discovered they needed to have 2 towing paths, we'll get to that a little later, they decided, we have a letter from the chief engineer saying, well, we're going to have to build some loading slips. And so this was built in probably 1852, a pair of them. There would have been a bridge over those 2 abutments over there. And then this big 90 foot by, oh, I'm going to say 30 to 40 foot. I haven't taken a tape measure out there. No, I have to laugh. I'm going to swing around this way for a minute, see if the camera will follow me. It's hard to make out, but this was all dug out to accommodate this key. And we'll see a lot of that along this walk. This wasn't on the original route of the canal, and we'll show you why, but it was made necessary after the final enlargement of 1850 because there were very tight turns that I think there's also spots where the locks were too close together. Suffice to say, they were forced to dig here, which was pretty expensive. Boy, look at all that growth in there. It's nice to be into the cool part now, isn't it? Do either of you have any favorite canal stories while we're walking a little bit here?
I personally love this path up here that takes you to what used to be Mr. Apple's apple orchard.
That's now Ethan Salovey now owns local. I'd like to give a shout out to our local business owners.
Once we get to it, you'll see the deep cut of High Falls, and it is the most gorgeous view down that you can never imagine falling down because you would actually, you'd be done.
I've never been. You'll have to take me.
In seconds.
You'll have to take me, Amanda.
Gorgeous, and it's worth it. And you start right here, and it's honestly a little bit of a hook. You need a little bit of stamina to do it.
We've been seeing more visitation on the 5 Locks Walk since COVID, over 1,000 to 2,000 people a week. I'm just going to take a second, and here we get another view of this bypass or supply flume. And from what we can tell, it was probably covered in this stone its entire length, so nobody hurt themselves. There we go. We're going to see my last live 2 weeks ago. I had more problems. So far, so good. That's why I'm doing the filming, because I didn't want my poor staff to try and figure this out. We're trying to get better every week, and we are. Courtney's been doing a wonderful job of videotape, of editing the videotape. I do not envy Courtney the fact that she spends at least 10 hours a week watching and listening to me. Largely listening, fortunately, but watching as well. But she's been doing a wonderful job, and we hope that you all will go look at our YouTube channel. How many videos do we have now, Courtney?
26, I think, and we have 90 subscribers last I checked yesterday. So we need 10 more to hit 100, and once we hit 100 subscribers, we can create a custom URL, which will make it that much easier for everyone to find us on YouTube.
And there's 8, oh, we just lost somebody. I was going to say, if all 8 of you, if you have not, subscribe when you're done here, because you'll get us darn close to that magic number. And what do we have here?
This is lock 17.
Really?
It comes after 16.
Oh, no, it's hard to tell that it's a...
Yeah.
So the story is that this one, they restored the 5 locks. This one would have cost the entire bankroll. I forget the exact dollar amount. It was in such bad shape. But we do have an idea. Amanda, want to show me a picture? Because we're fortunate. We don't have a lot of pictures of too many of them. You want to do me a favor and hold that there? This is what this looked like. In fact, are we on the right? Yes, this end would have had that. That's the gear. Oh no, actually this is looking, oh, let's do it. We're going to do the right thing. If you're wondering, well, how we know how many people have walked this, here you go. Our trail counter. We're going to increase it by 6. So you can see all along here, when we get up to the end of it, how badly, look at all that block. You know, people started, in about 1902, when this section lost its water, people immediately started taking block and using it. We find it all over the area. There's railroad trestles whose bases have been built on it. There's some block that we're going to lose in this century if something isn't done. So I just thought I'd get to here, since it's always fun to go here. There's that little one. Oh, yeah, no, not that one. We did that already. Oh, no, we didn't do that, but that was the one for this, but right there. And that is, interestingly enough, that's the steam launch. Not, the only people that operated a steam launch were the Canal Company. You could only go 3 miles per hour. I hope you can hear me. We got to get away from this lock too, don't we? The perils of live broadcasting, people. We should get to quieter and better. This place, just don't touch a thing, Bill, whatever you do. This walk is so popular that people contact me all the time. Recently somebody wanted me to do something about this moisture here. We're working on it. We're going to need some heavy, we're going to need to make a better drain. Every one of these locks had bypass flumes on the side of them, and I looked at the maps in preparation for today. These two, the bypass flumes, were on the other side, and they were underground, if I'm reading the map correctly. So I imagine there was absolutely no sign of those left. Well, we can talk about 2 things right here, right?
The elephant in the room?
Oh, no, not the tree. That I was going to ignore. What are you talking about? Yeah, well, that's nature for you. So as I'm saying a lot lately, the only constant is change, people. No, I'm thinking of the deep cut here at High Falls. Well, this time of year, always harder with all the foliage. But I think you can all make out way up there.
How high would you say that is?
That's got to be 40 or 50 foot up. And we go over here, and I don't know if you can really make it out, but it's up that far. They had to take out a lot of material. And there was another problem. Do you see how high up we are here? the boats would have been down, well, these locks all had 12 foot of lift, literally 12 feet lower than this. This is exactly the reason why they had to have 2 towing paths.
So the lines wouldn't get crossed.
Yeah, they had problems in the first year, and how do we know this? Primary sources. We've got letters of the chief engineer that talk about this. Now, one of these houses, I'll always get it wrong, was the lock tender's house for 2 of these locks. We think 15 and 16, they stayed at the Canal house, and I believe, I'm just going to get this right, I think it could be that house right there that was for both. Hard to see that too, though.
In our notes it says brown in parentheses, so that house is brown.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that's the one. It has the look. They were kind of cookie cutter. The Canal Company supplied lock tenders with a house, and they were all made on the same pattern. In fact, the loading slip that was on the firehouse side, opposite where we were, was just a depot for wood, for the lock linings, for any of the work that needed to be done, and presumably if they were building a lock tender's house. And here we are at lock number, I'm going to get my, 19.
18.
18?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. See, keep me honest. 18. You'd think after the 10 years I've been doing this, wouldn't you? We don't have a whole lot to talk about here, except that we could show them these snubbing posts a little better.
Yeah. And the remnants from the doors.
Well, what are we looking at there, Courtney?
That's where the miter gates would have been, correct?
Originally, yep.
Yes.
That end got a
House
drop gate
remnants.
after 1857, but see what happens is when I touch it to make it look at what I want it to look at, I'm not careful. And while we're here too, I love these little signs. You see all those holes along that rock? That's how they split it. They would drill those holes in, and then they put things called feathers and wedges. 2 little metal feathers, and then the wedge went down the center. You'd set them all, and you'd just keep tapping them until it split on that line. That's man-made, but then all of this was, isn't it? So, been 118 years since any boats came through here. This snubbing post, she's a crooked.
It was a little tired.
Yeah, and yet there's not a whole lot of wear on this one either, is there?
No.
Let's see if we got better wear on the next one up.
Yeah, I can see.
It's also in the shade, which will help me if not the video. Okay, oops. Oh, there were 10 of you for a minute. I hope you're running over to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Oh, stop it, Bill. Stop it. So there you go. Those are the rope burns. They could lock through in 5 minutes. Actually, it used to take 8 minutes, but then they managed to do 5. I'm going to run back here for a minute. They did what they called swelling out. They'd actually open the gates early and let the flood of water float the boat out. And as a consequence, they had to let's see if you can see this with the lighting what it is. But yes, you see that stonework I'm looking at there? That was put there to keep the banks from eroding. And that may have even been put in when they started regularly swelling out, which was pretty much when these locks were built in 1850. They would have liked to have swelled out the earlier boats. They actually weren't big enough to navigate the Hudson. They would have swamped. Beautiful day for a walk. And again, you can see where they had to cut. You can see up that line up there. They took all this material up by hand. If you can imagine. I certainly can't. Well, I can imagine. I just wouldn't want to do it. That's more to the point. And you know, I keep forgetting to look for this. But I can tell you, even without looking at it, even if it didn't make the maps, that what we're looking there, those are bridge abutments. There's one on each side. And they're awful close together, but that's because only a single boat, 2 boats could be out there, where it's wider, and over here. Oh, swelling out, Veronica? Swelling out was when they released the water early. So the lock has still got 2 or 3 foot of water. They would open the gates early, and that flood of water would carry the boat out the lock. And after 1857, they converted all of their locks to a unique, semi-patented scheme, which was patented by somebody on the D&H Canal, so we know it was for this canal. And there was a gear house at that far end, and in fact, our next lock, there's a bridge where the gear house was. And so it would have been hard to pull the boat out. Swelling out got it under the gear house that sat on the top of that lock. I don't know if one of our pictures has. Yeah, let me get a look at that picture again, Amanda. Oh, it's that one. Let's look at one of the other ones. We'll see. Oh, the second one. Okay. Either one of these. The gear house is much more apparent, but we gotta. Okay, you're right-handed. There we go. So there's the gear house, and to swell out, they'd release the water so the boat could get under there, would leave, and they wouldn't have to pull it out or anything like that. We have a very long boat hook found near those loading keys that they must have used to get the boats in. So if you had a boat coming this way and it wasn't powered like this boat was, that long boat hook would be a way to snake the tow rope underneath the gear house. Members of the DHTHC, of which I'm now the president, anytime, Veronica, of which I'm president, we had many discussions until we sort of worked this out between reading there's a great court case I always talk about, the 1858 PA Cole case. We're learning an awful lot from this underutilized source. Thank you for that, Amanda.
We'll have to film our lock model in the museum to show people what swelling out looks like one day. Yeah,
and I'm going to need help for that one. Yeah. You know, I've been doing these tours because we want to be socially distanced. I'm wearing a mask, people. Just to, you know, you women are far enough apart. You're okay. Boy, look at what they had to dig. Look at all that rock and stuff. This had to be some rough going. You know, this is before dynamite. This is like, boy, and all this material was moved out by, mainly by wheelbarrows and draft animals. I always like to say at this point, it makes me tired just to talk about it, you know? We've only got 6 people watching us now, but that's okay because this will be living on our Facebook page as well as on our YouTube channel. And Courtney, I think you have a tale to tell here. At lock 19, right? I'm going to get the numbers right now. Right, lock 19.
So I'll tell you the story now, but if you really like it and want to hear it again, it will be live on YouTube next week on the 26th for Construction Part 2 on our virtual museum series. So...
Oh, so you're going to tell the story before I got to?
Yeah.
No.
But you have better visuals. I mean, unless you want to walk all the way over there.
Oh, yeah. Me, I'll walk anywhere.
All right.
But I'll let you talk, and you can even bring me over there if you'd like.
All right, let's go over here first so we can see what I'm going to talk about.
You know, we're just trying to incorporate more people, folks. Thank you for your patience. We're working it out.
So the fun part about Lock 19, once we get over here, is that you can see some of the old drill marks.
Drill marks?
Right there. It was using a star drill or a star bit, I can't remember exactly.
They refer to it as a star drill, and it was a long iron tool with a star-shaped head on the end of it.
So they would pretty much have one person bang from the top, do a quarter turn, and then bang again, and just keep drilling all the way down.
You had at least 2 men. It was usually men. I mean, there were women working on the canal, but I can't imagine this was the labor they did. And so you had a guy holding the star drill, right? Mm-hmm. And you had 1 or 2 guys with the sledgehammers. I think I'd rather have the sledgehammer, huh?
Yeah. So the purpose of drilling these holes, oh, and there's another one over there, we can show them.
Yeah,
when
that was...
the tree came down, it revealed another drill mark.
Yeah, you're stealing my thunder here. Look at that.
Because I already edited the video. I know all the good lines.
Mike, they hired contractors to do sections on the D&H too. And in fact, if you travel along its 108-mile route like I have, you'll see different materials, different forms of working. Most bridge abutments will end in a bridge abutment today. We're not cemented together, but I've seen 2 or 3 cemented together. They last a lot longer when they're cemented together. The materials differ depending on what was available. The men lived in huts. Sometimes, Mike, they also lived on a boat. I've got testimony of a particularly enterprising Irishman who rented, when they were doing work, I think it was even in the loading over I was talking to you about earlier, and he rented space on his boat, and I got the impression he probably lived in the boat as well. But they lived in little shanties sometimes. It was a lot of Irishmen, a lot of immigrants.
We're going to talk about one in a minute.
That's right. What a segue.
So the purpose of these drill marks were to help blast the rock. So once the hole was drilled, they would fill it with black powder, because as Bill said earlier, dynamite was not around yet. And then it was lit with paper and saltpeter. And then ignited with a coal. And basically there were 3 different outcomes you could have. The first was your blast was successful and the rock went everywhere.
Oh, you can't see it well today.
No, it's covered up by the leaves. Option number 2 is that your blast was not successful. Maybe you didn't put enough black powder or too much saltpeter and it just didn't fizzle. Or maybe you lit it and you just didn't run out of the way fast enough as well. Or option 3 was that just nothing happened. So either way, for options 2 or 3, someone has to be the brave guy to go and check and see what's going on. maybe see that nothing happened, or maybe arrive at the wrong time.
I always imagine at that point, if you had a live round and didn't know what was happening, you took lunch. Yeah. That's it, you know. All right, let's give it an hour. I suppose you might run over with a bucket of water. That could still be dangerous. Yeah. No.
So we have a story from Niles Register.
Niles Register was one of the biggest newspapers of its day in America in the early 19th century. I don't remember the exact years. It was a Baltimore-based newspaper, and like so many newspapers of the period, they would cull from all the other local papers and cover interesting stories. And this Niles Register story is a particularly good one.
Yes, I could give you the spark notes, but I think it'd be more evocative if I read it in the original language. So here is an excerpt about Patton the Blaster. A rock 40 feet high and about 25 wide on the line of the Hudson and Delaware Canal in Marbletown, New York, was blasted about 4 weeks ago by an Irishman named Patton. He bored a hole in the rock, into which he put 70 pounds of powder and applied the torch in the presence of numerous spectators. The tremendous explosion totally dislodged it from its bed, and placed it so exactly on the bank of the canal as to prove a substitute for the embankment equal to its dimensions. The contractor for that section had given Patton $5 to blast it, but the blast proved to be worth the full $100. A piece of the rock, 3 feet square, fell within 2 feet of one of the spectators and sunk so deep into the frozen ground that nothing of it could be seen. Particles of it were picked up in Rochester, several miles distant.
At this point, I always like to point out, not the Rochester on the Erie, but the lesser known, unless you live near here, Rochester is the next town down the canal from here. And it's still called Rochester, isn't it? Rochester, of course, was also the black, what was it? Was it Rochester, right? Well, in some films in the 1930s, but I digress.
I thought it was Rochester.
It probably was. You're better at... Thank you for that. Not D&H related, but still, you know, I learn something new every day. I like to say it's why I get up in the morning. Here we have what was probably built along, again, the bypass flume. And you can see why it would be on this side. They didn't have the room. Remember, they had 2 10-foot wide towing paths here on each side. They wouldn't have a room, nor would they have the means to put the bypass flumes in the rock. And so they were able to dig them in the dirt here.
This is also the other end of the path where you go over there as well.
That's right.
And in the video that's coming on next week, it was shot about a month ago when there's less greenery, and you can see some of the blast leftover rocks on the other side.
And you know, Courtney, I gave tours for like 5 or 6 years before I started going, oh yeah, that's all just rock from the blasting, isn't it? Yeah, but I know they're too sharp-edged to be man-made. We're fortunate that we have as much of this canal left as we do. And I always like to say that's why I got so interested in this history. Well, here's another spot, too, where you can see how high the towing path had to be. Boy, the amount of blasting they had to do. Incredible. Another interesting feature, since we're walking along here, the canal was originally 32 foot wide on the top, 20 on the bottom, what we called a prism shape. But in the final enlargement, they went to 40 or 50 feet. Or did they? In some sections, like you see right here, they squared it up. And so in this instance, what we've got here is this could be narrower. They just wanted two 14.5-foot wide boats to be able to pass without hurting each other, without running into each other, etc. Here is a spot. Now, I want to make sure I don't hang up by mistake. Here, it's, of course, hard to see, but this stonework here would have had a wooden gate. This is where the lock tender could open this up and allow water to go down to the next lock. Each lock tender was responsible that there was 6 foot of water down from his lock so that boats could navigate. And you had to give them the water. It amazes me that this entire stretch was watered from a little stream 2 miles from here, that today it goes into the golf course and they've made a little pond, but in the historic era it came in, it caused a basin that they repurposed for a bluestone loading dock, and it, in the canal era, that was all the water they had from here until the other side of the roundout. The roundout, they had a dam there, and when the canal dropped down below the level of that dam, the water was fed into it. But it astounds me that these, well, there's 5 locks, 6 locks when you count 15, the other side of the street. You know, so every time a boat goes through, an entire lock's full of water had to be going through as well, and they're locking through in 5 minutes. We know these locks were operating 24 hours a day, at least in the 1830s and in the 1850s. We also know that they started mandating that you stopped, although you couldn't really make them stop. And there's in the court testimony, they talk about, they found that, not surprisingly, that they actually did better when they gave them a rest. The things you have to learn. That's right up there with them paying cash regularly. You think, oh, didn't they always do that? No, in the middle of the 19th century, very often it was barter. Very often you had an account and you settled up when you got a windfall. The D&H company, we're told, was popular because they paid you in cash every month. Here's another one of the bypass flumes. Right here. Way overgrown.
That's funny. The most well-kept block. I took my graduation pictures here because there was nowhere else to go because everything is closed.
I want all great events in my life to be around the D&H Canal, Courtney. Amanda, what can we talk about? We have a story here that you might want to tell us.
Here we have the remnants of the Hardenberg store. You can kind of see where it cut in half. The top half was for the road, and the bottom half was for the canal. And then she is a past president, right? Who owns them?
Yes.
Yeah,
Gretchen Reed now works at the Mohawk Preserve.
Yeah. And across the street right here, you can see the remnants of the warehouse of the Hardenberg store.
We're gonna have to clean that out a little somewhere in here, aren't we? We may be getting some tree work done this fall. So
A little too many.
this is
It's in a little jungle.
and you know, these buildings weren't built until the 1850s, maybe a little before, and they operated until about 1902. But now it's 118 years later, and apparently these buildings didn't serve a purpose. I've been discovering, studying the 1854 maps of the canal, that there was groceries. Like, there was 2 groceries at one lock. Quigley's lock, I think it was, had 2 groceries. And there was a grocery at each lock. Imagine the amount of, to be successfully have a store that often, you must have had a tremendous amount of traffic. But in their heyday, they had 1,000 boats with, should have been 3-man crews. You got 3,000 people traversing it, and you got to feed them and the like.
Yeah, that one book I went through last year, there were a lot of grocery store receipts. The
Markles, yeah, yes. We'll be getting some of that stuff before the year's out. We'll have a lot of that up and available for the public.
On our new website.
On our new website, that's right. How did they stop the water they used to fill these when they stopped using canals? Very often they were filled in, Veronica. The local... In fact, there's a famous story, I always love to tell this story. The mayor of Port Jervis in the 1900s, the canal is no longer being used down that far south. He drunkenly falls in the canal one weekend, hopefully, but who knows. And then he spearheads a drive to fill in the empty canal along in Port Jervis. And as a consequence, if you go to Port Jervis today, there are very little, besides the street names, Canal Street and Hudson Street, there's very little remains of the D&H Canal. But actually, a lot of it is not filled in, and that's fortunate. If you go to our YouTube channel and watch my favorite episodes, Where is Our Historian? I guide you on largely publicly accessible, although sometimes people are nice enough to let me go look at what's on private property, and show you what is still extant. And there are watered sections that are incredibly evocative. You'll always hear me waxing philosophically on the video about, oh, this is so much like what the canal used to be like. I mean, one thing I love to point out, you see all these trees? There was nothing. That's why they needed the coal. All our pictures, you see very little trees. This is all 20th century growth, which, by the way, is typical of all of the Northeast.
And a lot of those spots will be on our D&H Canal map for every video that...
That's right. I forget to promote the map. We don't have a hard link for that. You have to go back on Facebook. We've been creating an interactive Google map, and we link the Where Is Our Historian, so you'll actually get video of me talking about what's at that site. And it shows you clearly where you can park, where there's public parks. And we'll be adding to it. I'll be working on that the rest of my days, too. We'll continually add to it.
Yeah.
It's currently linked. You'll have to go back about 2 weeks. I put up a Facebook post with the link.
And I can add them to our YouTube descriptions as well in the future videos.
And our new website is due to go live in the next week or two. Kayla's done a wonderful job. Her usual... I don't know that she's got actual graphics art training, but... Boy, I love the donation box.
Oh, yes.
So that was so much fun. I'm never doing graphics again, I promise y'all. Well, we know y'all got to go get back to Dad and stuff. But let's go and we'll do one more feature here. What do you say?
Sure.
We've been joking that Amanda here is Vanna. I always said Carol Merrill. I don't know if that's somehow like showing my age or what. I mean,
It's true, showing your authenticity.
you know, I live on Berm Road, and I'll come along, and it was built right into the berm side of the canal, and you get these spots that go up like this, and every time I do, I go, bridge. And in fact, you look on the maps, and they were bridges. And so this may not look like much. Would one of you like to talk about what we've got going on here? I'm going to see if they can see it, because that's always better. Well, I'm going to go over to...
Well, this was the spot where it was first come, first served, no?
That's where there's the tiny other sledding post on the opposite side.
I can't see it myself.
Yeah, it's really hard to make out, and I cannot do any zooming in currently. I'll have to buy something different to do that.
Maybe it's clearer from here. It's kind of a straight shot through the bushes, potentially.
Yeah, you know, and it looks so much like a... What we're all talking about is that
Oh, it looks like a tree.
the property owner recently cleared over here, and we discovered there's a snubbing post, but it's on the far side of the towing path. When we get to the N-word locks and Roebling Aqueduct, whereas our historians, I noticed one at the outside end of the Roebling Aqueduct here in High Falls as well. And my surmise is that those snubbing posts were deliberately placed across the towing path so that it would keep the order of the boats. You put a rope there. Many of the mules, there's a wonderful story about Solomon the mule, who got dragged into the canal on a rope. He makes the New York Times. Got dragged into, he was known to be a really ornery mule. So men he would kick, but he was great with children. And Solomon gets pulled into the canal on a towing boat. And after that, he would never cross a rope. He was very smart. And so my surmise is that when they put these, I wish I could get a zoom in feature on here. But when we put these, you're just going to have to watch the Roebling Aqueduct one where I get in nice and close. They were placed on the other side of the towing path so that the rope actually kept anybody. This is the site of Robinson's Bridge here. And it's my contention that probably from this bridge, all the bridges, aqueducts, and locks were single file. And I think that boats had to wait over here on this side of Robinson's Bridge. And it went single file from here all the way in. So you might tie up on that snubbing post while awaiting your turn. Only took 5 minutes. That just really amazes me. Yes, Mike, I thank you for that. The standing water. One of the things I like to say about to defend the poor, not necessarily drunken Port Jervis mayor, is that was exactly the era in American history when finally, and this happened on the Panama Canal, but I don't want to digress too far, but they discovered that standing water, that it wasn't the miasma, it wasn't the swamp gas that was getting you, it was the diseases carried by mosquitoes. And so very often, if you want to get rid of the mosquitoes and not use poison, get rid of standing water. And that you know, in defense of the man, you know, a little bit of you know, one night out and you fall in the canal and everybody calls you a drunk, you know. But maybe in fact he was really worrying about your health, people. It was a public health thing. Well, you know, I think we're at a point. Well, first I'd love to thank my excellent, you know, the Canal Society is really lucky in the people that work for us, and Courtney's been doing a wonderful job. Courtney, you've worked for us for 3 years. 3 years.
Yeah,
see,
2018,
I'm having so much fun. The time is just, you know. And Amanda, we were just discussing. This is your probably was a year last May that you started working for us.
Yeah.
We're not open now. We don't know if we'll be open this season, but. Sorry, space bars, yes. Oh, with the rope burns. Yes, the snubbing post. You can tell, Mike, you can tell a lock snub from a basin snub, because the basin snubs never got the rope burns. It was only the lock snubs. I think that this is a good point to say adieu, as they say in France. Wish you all a happy Father's Day. I want to thank Amanda Winters and Courtney McNamara for joining me and helping me out today. And please join me again in 2 weeks when we'll have Sunday afternoons with our historian. I haven't decided what we'll do then, but I'll decide before then. Keep an eye out. Oh, Father Divine, well, yeah, but he doesn't have the D&H history. Thank you, William. You all have a wonderful Father's Day.